Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. If you have a 65 through 66 Mustang with the factory power steering, then I don't have to tell you how vague and overboosted it is, not to mention the complicated system of control valve and slave cylinder is just begging for leaks. The 66 convertible here has a factory power steering setup on it. Most of the time it barely works and spends more time leaking than doing much anything else. So today we're going to upgrade the power steering system using this Borgeson power steering upgrade kit, which will fit your 65 through 66 Mustang with the 289 engine. This Borgeson power steering upgrade kit is going to be a direct replacement for the factory components on any 65 through 66 289 Mustang. It will be a direct bolt-on for the automatic. However, if you have a stick shift car, you will have to get the Borgeson Z-bar set up to work with your factory linkage. The beauty of the Borgeson system is this box here. The box itself has the power assist built into it. What that means, 2 lines only. 1 line to your power steering pump, 1 line back from the power steering pump. No slave cylinders, no control valves. More likely, no leaks as well. The kit includes the box itself, new power steering lines, a new steering shaft, and then a new center link to get rid of your factory power center link. It's a 14-to-1 box for a nice sporty feel without being overboosted. Again, it's going to be a direct replacement that installs with basic hand tools. Like I mentioned in the intro, this kit's going to install with basic hand tools, but you'll need a whole bunch of them, more than we're going to list for this video. But a basically well-stocked toolbox, the only specialty tool you'll need is something to cut the steering column with. In our case, we used a large saw, but a sawzall or any other saw will work as well. This is typical of your power steering system on an early Mustang. You can see the boot for the slave cylinder is all dried out and ripped, leaks everywhere, fluid everywhere. We're going to try to clean this up a little bit before we take it apart. But basically, yeah, this is going to be a mess because a lot of times fluid gets everywhere with these original systems. First thing we're going to do is start by removing all the factory components we don't need. Now in this case, we're going to remove the slave cylinder and the control valve with the center link is all in one piece. All that stuff comes off. So we'll start by working on the bracket for the slave cylinder. We're going to work on the idle arm and some of the other pieces of the suspension. So we're going to start by removing all these extra cotter pins, then we can remove the hardware. Now we're going to work on the fluid lines here. You will lose some fluid when these come off, so you want to make sure you have a drip pan underneath them. I'm going to use a pickle fork to separate the control valve from the arm. Now I know there are special tools and other ways to do this. We're not trying to save the stock components. We know they're junk, so we're just trying to get them out of the way. We're going to remove the lines now at the control valve, just make it easier to get everything out of the way. Now you can remove the center link with the slave cylinder and the control valve. Okay, now we're going to move forward with the hoses by removing the hose bracket. Now we're going to disconnect the lines up in the engine bay. You want to make sure it is a Ford pump. This will only work with the original Ford style power steering pump. If it's an aftermarket pump or another style pump, the lines included with the kit are not going to be correct. And then the secondary line is held on by a hose clamp. Okay, with everything out of the way, now we're going to unbolt the steering box. There's 3 bolts on the outside of the frame rail. Remove these to unbolt the box. All right, on the 65 through 66 Mustang, the steering shaft comes up to the steering wheel, but it's part of the steering box assembly. So to remove everything from the car, we've got to remove the wheel, so we're going to remove the column and then the shaft. We'll start by removing our horn button. So it'll simply pop off, and then remove the center bolt. Now, sometimes you get lucky, the wheel will pop off. Other times you'll have to use a puller to remove it. Remove the turn signal stalk now. There's actually a little flat part here for a wrench. Ours is just hand tight. I'm just going to turn it and remove it. Then you want to go underneath the dash here. There'll be 2 harnesses you want to disconnect. In our case, our car had some what we'll call creative wiring done at some point in time that we'll worry about later. You want to disconnect all the wires that are going up to the column so we can separate the column from the steering shaft. And now what we want to do now is very carefully pry the column tube off the shaft. Now you can remove the tube from the car. Now, unfortunately, with the 65 through 66 Mustang, the steering shaft is part of the steering box. So to get the box out of the car, literally you have to either remove the entire exhaust and tilt the engine, or in our case, since those components are junk and don't care about them, we simply cut the shaft out under the hood so we can pull it straight out. All right, to install the column back in the car, what we're going to have to do is actually cut the column tube because of the size of the Borgeson box, plus we're adding a rag joint to it, the tube's going to be too long in the factory configuration. Now what you want to do, you do this one of 2 ways. You want to get the measurement from here down to the base, which is going to be 1 3/4 in our case. Now if you want to, take that measurement before you remove the column from the car. What we did here is just reattach the box and put the factory shaft right where it was to get that measurement correct. Now what we're doing here is now we're going to line this up with the new shaft. Now what we're going to do down here, this is going to be the piece that is supplied by Borgeson that goes at the end of the column once you cut it. This has to be a 1/16 or less from the rag joint. So what we did is assembled everything here. Basically got it touching. Now what we're going to do is put this in there, figure out what straight over is, and then make a mark. Now there will also be some adjustment in the rag joint where it actually is seated once we get it installed, which could basically take up about 1/4 inch. So what you want to do with the tube is cut it a little bit short to begin with. Basically on the inside of our line should be about where we need it to be, and if we have to, we can make adjustments and trim it later. Okay, now we're going to use our chop saw here to cut the column. Now we're going to assemble everything on the table again to make sure we're neighbored where we're supposed to be. Everything's tight down here. We have a 1/16 of an inch gap, just like is recommended. Now what we'll do here is once again measure from that base plate 1 3/4 inches, just like the original, so we're good to go. While I'm working under the hood, Jeff's gonna remove the factory gasket from the firewall and replace it with a metal sleeve included with the Borgeson kit. When we install the new plate, there is only one way it's going to go. One tab will be up and the other one will be outside towards the driver. Okay, before we put the box in the car, we're going to install the rag joint. It only goes on one way. You want to be careful. Both sides will actually fit on. This side will be a lot looser though. I'm going to put it on, basically seat it all the way down. And what I'm going to do is remove the set screw. I'm going to grab a marker, and right where the set screw is going to touch, we're going to make a mark on the spline. So what we're going to do there is grind the spline smooth so the set screw is a nice flat place to connect. Now it's ready to go in the car. You're going to use the supplied hardware, and I'm going to reuse the original washers. If you get some help here, have someone hold the box in place, and then you can line up the hardware and install it. Now we'll do the same thing with the steering shaft. We're going to remove the set screw and put the shaft in from inside the car and then mark it. We'll do the same thing here, right where we marked, we're going to grind a little flat spot for the set screw. Then I'll reinstall the shaft. Before we put the column tube back in, there's this plug that goes on the end here, which is going to go around the steering shaft, and there's a screw to actually hold this in place. You want to put it on the top of the column, because you may have to remove the screw to put it through the metal plate in the firewall, so make sure it's somewhere you can actually access it. Now we're going to take the column tube and actually put it over the steering shaft. Jeff's going to do it from the inside. I want to make sure everything lines up out here. Now this is what you want it to look like under the hood. The steering column tube has to come up to the rag joint. You want no more than a 1/16 of an inch between the rag joint and the column tube, because if you don't, these studs here may not align properly when you're turning it, and it could cause damage down the road. This is exactly how you want it to look. Now we're going to bolt the column back up and move on with the installation. Okay, now we can actually work on the hoses. We're going to start with the pressure hose. And then the return hose. While I tighten up the hoses underneath the hood, Jeff's going to put this band clamp on. This goes around the column at the bracket just to give you a little more support. Once all your hoses are connected and tightened down, you want to make sure they're not near the manifold or header. Give yourself plenty of clearance. You have to zip tie them out of the way. Just make sure that you have a smooth line for the return. It's not kinked, but again, keep it away from heat. I'm going to reinstall the screw that we put in earlier. All right, the column installed, before we go back underneath the car, we have to get an idea of getting the steering wheel somewhat in the center so we can set up the suspension. So what we're going to do, put the spring on, we're going to reinstall the wheel. And I want to tighten it down, just put it on enough to keep it from coming off so it stays on the splines. And now we want to measure the turns. So go all the way over to the side. Our starting point is this facing up. 1 rotation, 2 rotations, 3, 3 and roughly 3/4. So what you want to do It's basically figure out, start on the end here, cut that in half, go back to roughly where the middle is, center the wheel, and then we'll go onto the car. All right, so basically we want to go 1 1/2 and 3/4, halfway, be right about there. Now obviously this will need an alignment when you're finished. We want to get roughly in the center so we can get close when we set up the suspension, at least make it drivable to get at the alignment shop. I'm going to start by installing everything. No hardware, just kind of get it mocked up. Just get an idea where everything's going to go. I'm putting the pitman arm in. You want to make sure there are slots. Kind of want to make sure they line up. Now we'll go back through, reinstall cotter pins, or install new ones if you have them. Okay, everything bolted on underneath. Now we're gonna move back up top here and fill up the pump. Okay, now we're ready to test out our system. All right, now we're going to fire it up, make sure everything works. Yep, everything feels good. Now keep in mind with the Borgeson, it's a power assist kind of setup, so it's not going to be over boosted like the factory where, you know, one finger you can spin it. This has a really good road feel, but it gives you a nice amount of assistance, so you still get the power steering feel, but still get a good feel for the road at the same time. Everything's good. Now you got to clean up the wiring underneath the dashboard, tighten up your steering wheel, and your installation's finished. The Borgeson power steering conversion is not the easiest installation, but overall it's definitely worth it. That overboosted feeling's gone, much better road feel, yet still the power assist that we were looking for. Now as far as this installation goes, this is a power to power conversion. This kit's also available for manual to power. The difference being you're going to add a power steering pump, which is included with the kit, and you'll add a 2-groove crank pulley, which you'll have to purchase separately. Overall, again, this is probably a weekend installation, but give yourself some time, make sure you get it aligned when you're done, be back on the road in no time.